Now, the making of a good compilation tape is a very subtle art, many do's and don'ts. First of all, you're using someone else's poetry to express how you feel. This is a delicate thing.
Welcome back to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. We've got a very special episode for you today. It's another interview, this time with an author, specifically the author Mike Hennberger, who wrote the book Rock Bottom at the Renaissance, an emo kid's journey through falling in and out of love in and with New York City. It's a great book, well worth your read if you enjoy reading. Even if you just like reading a little bit, it's a good read. If you like music, and anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit. In the interview, we talk about the book and how it came together and kind of its unique properties and sort of stories behind that. We also talk about all sorts of music, movies, TV shows, books, just all over the place. Literally a conversation that we went into and didn't have a plan, I guess you could say, and we just kind of let it go where it went, and I think it's a really good one. Well worth your time to sit here and listen, and I think you'll enjoy it. So before we get to the episode, though, let's get some of that, what do we call it? Oh yeah, housekeeping stuff out of the way. Go find us on Instagram and Twitter at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find myself and Aaron's personal Instagrams and Twitters linked there as well. And if you go to our website, growingpunkpod.com, we've got all sorts of other content going on there, from reviews, album reviews, to we've got top 5 lists and stuff going on there. And you can find some of the episodes there as well. I mean, you can find the episodes, but some, I guess, bonus content surrounding the episodes, maybe you can find there as well. Just all sorts of great stuff. growingpunkpod.com. You can join our email list and stay up to date with everything we've got going on there. You can also check out our merch store. Maybe grab yourself a t-shirt. Got a couple different designs hanging out for you there. And we've got a Patreon. If you feel like you want to support us, you like what we do, you can throw us a couple bucks there. But yeah, growingpunkpod.com, that's the website. Don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's get into this interview. It's me chatting with the author, Mike Hennberger. It's a good one, and you got it right here on Growing Up Punk. Yeah, man. So I'm glad we were able to finally sort out a time to do this, because we've been going back and forth a little bit. And first, I got to say off the top, because I think we're just going to kind of go down whatever rabbit trails we go down. But sure. Yeah, the book Rock Bottom at the Renaissance. I loved it, like start to finish, and I knew from the get-go, because I think is it on the back here? Oh yeah. New York City is also an easy place for a hopeless romantic to just become hopeless, especially when you're music-obsessed nerd who grew up on pop punk, emo, and John Cusack movies. As soon as I read that in the the synopsis on the back or whatever, I was like, all right, we are in. So just right off the top, I got to say you did a fantastic job. There are parts in this book where literally, and we were kind of messaging back and forth a little bit over Instagram. So it's kind of funny, because I've never read a book and had the opportunity to be discussing said book with the author while I'm reading it.
No, and it's very cool for me too, because I've kind of pushed it on a bunch of Facebook groups and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I actually get to talk to people who are reading it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's been very cool for me too. And the same on Instagram. I put all my social media handles in the book up front, so people can hit me up if they want. But yeah, I mean, I've just through promotion and Jack from Bayside shared some posts from it. The guys from Juliana Theory have shared some posts from it, or about it. And so people have just followed me on Instagram, and then I've been able to talk to a lot of people about it, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, it's been great. So let's go back to, I guess, the beginning a little bit for you then. At what point, I guess, did you realize that writing was something that you wanted to do?
Man, ever since I was a little kid, I remember my earliest memories in elementary school, writing stories and really enjoying it. But I didn't it wasn't something that I was consistent about throughout my life. I don't think I was ever really dedicated to anything until my mid-teens, when I started playing in bands.
Yeah.
And so I was a skater kid in my early teens, but other than that, I didn't really hold on to writing. I used to draw a lot when I was a kid too, but I never really held on to that either. And so I don't think it's not that I'm a writer. It's just that I love music so much, and I can't play it because I don't play any instruments.
Right.
So I've always, and when I played in bands, I was the singer of 2 different bands. And so I was always writing lyrics. But when I didn't have that, I started doing music journalism so I could write about music. Um, and so that still gave me a way to like express myself through by using music, and writing about it, but also kind of writing how I connect to it.
Right.
And that's basically what this book is. It's really just like I mean, it's a whole story in itself too, but I think it's just like almost everything that I write is revolves around music, and so I think it's more about me being obsessed with music and expressing myself with music than me being a writer, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a unique, I think, take on writing in the sense that, like every chapter is kind of sort of focused around a song. So I guess I should have said maybe that was the beginning when asking you about writing, but when do you remember getting into the music and kind of like that first band that you heard that sold you on, whether it was punk or emo or whatever?
Yeah, man. And can I can cuss on this, right?
Oh, go
All
ahead.
right. um, you know what it is? It's just that like when I like I listen to your podcast, but also like when I've listened to others in the past, it's like
Yeah,
when people are more professional hosts, I
right.
feel like I need to be more professional. um,
Look,
but so,
I'm sitting in, if I could show you, I'm sitting in a storage closet right now,
oh yeah,
essentially, that I've decorated the wall behind me just so there's something semi-interesting to look at. So
dude, I bet my home office is probably
yeah,
the size of your storage closet.
that's
I live
fair. That's
in New York
fair.
City. And I did the same thing, man. Once I started doing like more video
Yeah,
interviews and stuff, I finally framed my posters and put them
yeah,
up. I like mounted that shelf like 5 months ago when I started doing all this stuff,
that's
so I
great.
could put some stuff back there. Um, but you're gonna think I'm bullshitting you, which is why I asked.
Yeah,
But MXPX, man,
right
like
on.
I've heard you talk about MXPX so
Yeah,
much, but it's true. Like the first CD my brother and I bought was Teenage Politics.
yes, all right.
Um, and then like right after that, Rancid's and Out Come the
Yeah,
Wolves. So that was about like 95. So that's but I mean before that, I was hanging out, my brother and I were hanging out with this like group of skaters in our hometown. Because it was such a small hometown, everybody like college kids to junior high kids, which I was at that point. I was in junior high, but there were so few skaters that we all just hung out together, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And so those older kids would like make mixtapes of punk bands and ska bands, and they get passed around our group and stuff. And so like through those people, I learned about NoFX and Bad
Mm.
Religion and Blink 182 and Skank and Pickle, the Rudiments, like all this punk and ska stuff. And so I think it's like I'm not gonna like pretend I was cool or anything and that I immediately knew like I was into punk and ska. I think it was just like the association of that stuff with the feeling of being with all my skater friends and
Yeah,
like having that. That's kind of the first time I felt like a community,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
That's the big thing with punk music, I think, especially is just like that
yeah.
community that seems to come with it.
Yeah, because everything else before that, man, it's like, I was really in before that, like as a kid, I was into like the radio. So it was just like
Yeah.
R&B and pop music. Um, and there was no connection there, it's like everybody listened to that. So like nobody was like you weren't forming connections with other people through that music, or at least I wasn't. But then when I found like punk through those friends,
Yeah.
we were forming connections through it, and I think that's what just made it stick around.
So did you say with MXPX, sorry, did you say that like did someone show them to you or how did you come across them?
That's a good question. I don't know how we discovered MXPX. Actually, it had to have been through um, probably like magazines, maybe
Yeah,
like
okay.
because I became a Christian when I was like 13, but my family wasn't. So it was like I started going to church with some of my friends,
Hmm.
and but I was like the skater punk kid who had these other friends who were like from good like Christian families, but also skateboarded.
Yeah.
And so um Yeah, that's a good question, man. I don't know. I can tell you this though. I know that like there was a point where in Corpus Christi, which is like 45 minutes away from my small hometown, there was this like late night video game arcade that had like black lights and like played punk and stuff.
Classic. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's where, yeah, I mean, and this is like 95,
Yeah.
96.
Black lights at their peak.
Totally. Yeah. 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 And like a lot of like other like Corpus skaters hung out there. So we would drive up there with our friends who could drive. And I remember there was like a shoebox of CDs out of their cases. There's like used CDs that
Yeah.
you can buy for like $1. And it's crazy because I was just listening earlier to your episode with um the guy who does the repress records.
Oh yeah,
Tooth and
Jason. Yeah,
Nail.
from Unoriginal Vinyl. Yeah.
Yeah, and I went to the show that he mentioned with MXPX 90 Pound Wuss and Value Pack.
Oh,
That was the second concert I ever went to in my life.
right on.
And that was in 96.
Yeah.
But at this video game arcade, in this shoebox, I found an unpackaged, like, disc alone 90 Pound Wuss CD.
Yeah.
And also the first Supertone CD.
Okay.
And so at this point, I at least knew who they were. And but yeah, man, I don't know how, because me and my brother were the ones who kind of introduced Christian punk and ska to any of our Christian friends.
Yeah.
So I can't even I don't even know how I came across
stumped
that
you.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But it is interesting because so my first, I'm sure I mentioned it in one of those MXPX episodes. I know I've mentioned it before, but the first CD that I got into that got me into punk was Teenage Politics.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it's that same one, because I think a lot of people, when it was MXPX, it was either at the very beginning with Pokin' At Ya, or it was Life in General, slowly going the way of the buffalo, something along those lines. But so yeah, it's interesting that we were both Teenage Politics, because it also kind of seems to be one that's glossed over a little bit, I think, in the MXPX library, but that's great. So
you know what? It's very likely that we just bought it because we knew it was punk, and like we were in the punk section, and all of our friends were listening to punk, our skater friends, and I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe my brother had heard about him from somebody. But yeah, I guess because back then it was definitely, the times where like you just go to the punk section and like look at the covers, and like if it looks like something that, because where I come from, like the small town that I grew up in, we didn't hear about anybody, it was all kind of just like one track on a mixed cassette tape. So you didn't really know who to look for when you were looking at a CD section at a store. So it could very well have been that we just like liked the way it looked and knew it was punk and got it.
Yeah.
And then that probably, because I can't think of anything that pre-Teenage Politics that was Tooth and Nail for us. And so like finding out about Tooth and Nail because of Teenage Politics led me to getting 90 Pound Wuss and the Supertones,
Yeah. Was it the 90 Pound Wuss, like the self-titled, the Yellow album?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because I hear a lot of people talk. I owned that one and Shorthand Operation, like the one that came after with the woman wearing like the gas mask or whatever.
Which is very different.
Oh yeah. But it's funny because people talk about that band and how much they love like their later stuff. And I was like, I just always got hooked on that first record. And it was,
I'm with you, dude.
Yeah.
Everybody I knew loved like where they went with that band, but I did not.
It's funny because now as an adult, I feel like I should go back and listen to some of those things, because sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I just missed it, as that first record was like just straight up, kind of like punk rock or whatever. It was fast, it had attitude as whatever, and then their later albums, they kind of put a bit of a twist on that, and it just kind of went over my head maybe a little bit. But
no, same here. And I do that pretty often, where I go back to music that I didn't like then to see if I like it now. I haven't done it with them. I should try that, because I can't even imagine. I can't even remember at all what those later CDs sounded like. Yeah. But I can still hear the first album songs in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done that with like Stave Saker, who I never really liked and still don't like.
Yeah.
but yeah, I haven't. There hasn't been a lot of things that have changed my mind going back to them later in
Yeah.
life. You know.
It's funny that you bring up Stavesacre because just the other day I wrote a post that was like top 5 tooth and nail post-hardcore bands
Oh yeah.
and shared it in a Facebook group that we're both, I noticed, I think both a part of, and just got so much shit because
Oh man.
so many bands, or not bands, sorry, but so many guys were just like, why is it Stavesacre should be, like all 5 albums on this list or whatever. And I was like, I never really
Oh
looked at them as post-hardcore. And then so I was like, all right. So I went and listened. And then I had another post that I put up that I was like, I just still don't get it. And it brought up this thing where I was like, it's really interesting how at times defensive people can get over like their favorite bands. And if you say you don't like them, right? Like
yeah.
just how they can react. I'm like, okay.
It
like I
was
just, yeah.
it was like a blog. It was like a blog post.
Yeah. So yeah, because
Yeah.
on our website,
I'm looking at it right now because I
yeah,
remember seeing it and
yeah.
not really. I didn't really agree with it, but
Was that the list or the set? Because then I had the second post that was just like the cover of Speakeasy by Stavesacre, and I was saying, I still don't get it. But if it's the
I know this
list,
isn't what I was talking about. Yeah, I'm looking at I guess the list
yeah,
because yeah, Juliana Theory 238 I
yeah,
liked.
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I remember Further Seems Forever being number one, which
yeah.
I love that record so much. I still listen to that
Oh,
all the time.
all the time. And to be perfectly honest, when I wrote the list, it was the only record I was listening to.
Yeah,
I was just like,
yeah,
oh, I know what my number one is. There's no debate. But yeah, then just getting into discussions with people about, what is and what isn't post-hardcore is just funny. I'm like, all right,
oh
whatever.
yeah.
But it's funny that we've gone down. This wasn't the trail I expected to go down, so that's cool. But so you mentioned briefly, and you mentioned this in the book as well, that you played or you sang in a couple bands.
Yeah.
Were they both? Because I know one of them for sure. You said was a Christian ska band. Were they both kind of in that market, or?
Well, no. So the first one, yeah, was a Christian ska band, which I was in for 5 years, and we did some tour. We went on like 3 tours. Our last tour was with the Huntingtons and Sidewalk Slam from Tooth
Right
and
on.
Nail.
Yeah.
And then the second band I was in was, and this is like 2002, so it was like kind of like a Further Seems Forever,
Yeah.
Thursday,
Okay.
kind
Yeah.
of melodic screamo kind of band.
Right.
Um, and that was not a Christian band, but
Right.
like I still like wrote metaphorically,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I was pretty serious about that lifestyle in the first band. Um, not as serious about it in the second band, mainly because of the like ugly way that the first band broke up.
Sure.
Really messed me up and like broke my heart because those guys were like my best friends. And I mentioned that a little bit in the book
Yeah.
too, about how like that's like the worst heartbreak I ever had because when you're in a Christian band, it's more than just like you have the connection of the bond of being in a band with your friends, but
Yeah.
then you also in your head it's this like higher purpose and you're like doing God's work and stuff and
Yeah.
you're serving God through it. So you just put this so much more weight on it. So when it's taken away, you don't only lose the bond with your friends, but you lose all this other stuff that you made back,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was really hard. And I because of that, I kind of like stepped away from being so serious about that lifestyle.
Right.
And so the second band wasn't a Christian band. The other guys like weren't,
Yeah.
about that. So yeah, no, so the second band wasn't. The second band was pretty good too, though.
Are there any recordings of this band?
There are.
Yeah.
There are a couple recordings, nothing like good, nothing like
Right.
professional. The last we broke up before we like mixed our
Yeah.
professional record, which also like wasn't professional. It was a friend of ours had like a studio
Right.
in his house.
Yeah.
But it was recorded with good equipment and on Pro Tools in like 2003. But we didn't mix it, and so it really sucks. Like in the vocals, I hate the vocals on it.
Yeah.
So I would probably never show it to anybody.
That's fair. That's fair. It's funny though, because paralleling again I made those same transitions. I was never in a ska band. Like I played in a punk band that had like ska parts for
Yeah.
sure. Like, cause that was a thing at that time, right? Like you mentioned Rancid earlier and stuff like that, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you'd have this straight up like punk song and then a ska bridge breakdown type thing. And so
Oh yeah.
I go back and listen to, I recently found like the recordings of that, and I go back and listen to it and go, man, some of these songs I'm like, hey, they're not bad. Like I was 16, 17 years old and like
Oh
thinking about
yeah.
that. I'm like, all right. But then there's this weird ska part. Like, what was that all about? Just like the upstroke guitars. But and then as bands were doing at that time, we made that similar shift too, where we kind of got into more like the post-hardcore, melodic hardcore side of
Yeah.
things. And I learned, or I learned how to scream.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could like ever do it legit, like we had like a 3-song demo that I haven't heard for probably 15 years, that I'm like, in my mind I'm like, yeah, we did all right. I could scream all right, but we were just a local band sort of thing, right? So
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah. So the second band I was in was called Waiting on Wednesday. And there's some YouTube videos of
right.
live shows, that I'm super proud of,
Yeah.
because we were great live. But that last recording we made, I'm not super proud of.
Right.
But the live stuff, and then on my Facebook page, there's a bunch of videos of my ska band, from our last show we ever played. And man, we got really good after into like year 3. We started getting good, and we were all listening to like Alkaline Trio and Saves the
Yeah.
Day.
Yeah.
So we like the last probably 5 or 6 songs we wrote didn't have. I mean, most of our songs didn't have ska parts.
Right. Yeah.
Like we were just so influenced by like emo and stuff
Mhm.
like that it started becoming like everybody just called us rock with horns.
That's fair. That's
Yeah,
fair. That's the
early
best way to do
stuff
it.
was super like chan chan chan
Yeah.
chan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, where everyone just has to have a big smile on their face the whole time
Oh
because
god,
they sound
yeah.
so happy. Ska's making a comeback, man.
Is it?
I don't know. There's I shouldn't say that. There's been a couple actually decent ska records that came out this year.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's always been a genre of music that is like I only want to listen to it in a very specific time, and that's when I'm on my back deck barbecuing in the
Yeah,
summer
yeah,
sort of
no, for
thing.
sure.
Yeah.
I hate saying this because I hated everybody who said this 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'll listen to Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish
Yeah.
anytime they're
Yeah.
on. And I always, pick up Less Than Jake's new stuff. But yeah, I don't really see. I guess I'm just not on the right, like following the right things to see new ska that comes
Yeah.
out.
Well, I don't know who it is, but someone in Less Than Jake is in a band called The Inevitables that just
Yeah,
released
their
an album.
drummer
Yeah.
Vinny,
Yeah.
who doesn't drum for Less Than Jake anymore,
Oh, okay.
as of like last year.
Right.
But
So
yeah,
it's all right. Like I gave a quick listen to it and I was like, oh, okay, okay. But or Get Dead is a band that just put out a like they remind me a lot of like Rancid, especially in the way he sings, but then he also
cool.
brings kind of like rapping or more rhythmic singing into it. It's really neat. It's worth
Cool.
listening
I'll
to
have to
for
check it
sure.
out.
Yeah, Get Dead. But so back to kind of the book and writing. Who like do you have like much in the same way I guess with music? Do you have an author or a book or whatever that was kind of like opened your eyes to? I mean, because you were talking about doing music journalism sort of stuff, but opened your eyes to writing a narrative in a different way.
Um, no, I don't think so. And like I don't know if this is weird, but
It's too weird.
I'm not a big reader.
Actually,
Um,
that's funny because when we were first messaging back and forth, you mentioned I think that you bought or you whatever you got Our Band Could Be Your Life like on like the audiobook or
oh yeah, I
whatever.
did. Yeah, I still haven't listened to it though.
Which is so funny though, because I'm like, he's an author and he's doing the audiobook thing, but which is cool
Yeah,
too. Like I mean I get that. It's just I
it's a
love it.
couple of things, man. When I can actually make myself sit down and read, I fucking love it.
Yeah.
But I'm such a workaholic
Right.
that I feel guilty anytime I stop and do something that just like isn't like, which I mean, and I should be able to even justify that because I totally believe that if you're gonna write you need to read and see like what works, and it makes you a better writer. So I could totally justify that as being productive, but it's so hard for me to. I'm very I don't want to say like short-sighted, but I have a lot of things that need to be done now, you know?
Yeah.
And so as long as there's things that have to get done now, it's so hard for me to like do something that's going to pay off in the long run, you know? And so I don't like sit down and read a lot. I mean in the past I've read, yeah, I like Chuck Klosterman. I love how he writes about music. I've read some of his books. I love Nick Hornby. I've read a couple
Hmm.
of his books too, but in same thing though. It's like he writes about music like I
Yeah.
write about music,
Yeah.
um and I like the books that I've read are like that. I mean, in my adult life, and Rob Sheffield, who wrote "Love Is a Mixtape," he's a writer for Rolling Stone. Like
Right.
he
Yeah.
writes about music, like I write about music.
Yeah.
But I didn't read those guys before I read this. I wrote this book, you know. Um, I read Neil Strauss. I like him. He's also a music journalist, but he's a journalist, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
all around. But I like the way he writes. I read him back in the day. Um, but yeah, I mean, I like when I read in school, I never really liked anything that I was like forced to read in school except The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury,
All
which
right.
is like sci-fi,
Yeah.
and I hate sci-fi, but
Yeah. Okay.
I liked Ray Bradbury. And so I read a lot of nonfiction. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Like that's the thing. And I guess this is nonfiction. So I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so I read a lot of nonfiction about like writing, or, you know, writers who write about the things I want to write about so I can learn
Mm.
from them.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really do a lot of like recreational reading. I have 100 books that I want to read and that
Yeah.
like are
Oh.
here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't get to it.
Yeah. No, and I can appreciate that. Like I don't know what your views on thrifting are, but I like to go thrifting, specifically like buying CDs and looking for t-shirts. But if I like never find anything, I'll always go look at books too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll be like, okay, who are some authors that I like or whatever, and just go look for things. I have like a stack of books that's sitting on my bedside table right now that it's like, one day I'll read these, but more than likely they're just going to get redonated again.
Yeah. No, and I have this little like set of books right here that are
Yeah.
all books from like people that I know or like kind of know.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so I like buy them to like support them and also to read them, and I just like haven't gotten to them. But there's this one. Have you read this, From the Basement?
No, oh no, I've seen that one it get recommended on Amazon a couple times when I've been looking at similar books.
Yeah, so for those listening, it's From the Basement: A History of Emo Music and How It Changed Society. I
Yeah.
actually did read this
Oh,
cover to
there you go.
cover on the train to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good. It's mostly about like the Jersey emo scene, and
Yeah.
like in the early 2000s
Yeah.
and late 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good.
It's
Um,
those are the kind of books that I'm finding that like I love to read, whether it was you know, as mentioned before, Our Band Could Be Your Life, which was one that I'd heard about over the last number of years and then finally got around to reading, or Post by Eric Grubbs, which I brought up a number of times on this show because it's similar in the sense that it kind of looks at the evolution of post-hardcore and emo, starting though in like the late 80s, working all the way up to 2007, I believe. And then another book that I enjoyed parts of and parts of I got kind of annoyed at was Nothing Feels Good, which
yeah.
which I believe, from what I understand, it's kind of like written from an outsider's perspective on the scene sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they're covering, you know, a lot of those same bands. Like there's a chapter on Thursday in there and
Yeah.
Dashboard Confessional.
I would say, yeah, I've read that, and I think you're right. I think it is like, I think that guy he's like a music journalist. And I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
more from that perspective,
yeah.
from an outsider. But it's also like kind of like the first book about emo.
Sure, yeah.
And so, and it is also from like early 2000s, I think. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that like later books, you know, had to work with as far as like the effect it had on culture and like
yeah.
You know, groups of people and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think it's still at that point when he wrote that book, it hadn't really had much of an effect on.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's like Dashboard stuff in there, so I think
Yeah.
that's probably like it's like early Dashboard was probably like the latest thing in that book, I think.
Yeah, well, because I think maybe either early Dashboard or trying to think if when he's writing, if the MTV Unplugged show had happened, or
I
if
think it
even
was out.
if Mark Mission and Brand Ascar had it was, anyways, it was all kind of like definitely in that, like,
Yeah.
as Dashboard was about to, I feel like, explode.
Yeah, you're right. I think
The
you're right.
last chapter of that book was like work to get through, though, because it was all about, I believe it was about, is it like Makeout Club or whatever? It was like,
Oh,
yeah, like just like online, sort of like how
yeah.
emo was growing in that sense. And I was like, why am I like, I didn't participate in any of that sort of stuff, whereas like the
Yeah,
music
same.
I was all about. And so I was just like reading these people talking about like updating their blogs and how it's just like this huge, I'm like, okay.
Yeah. No, how old are you?
I'll be 36 shortly here in a couple days, actually.
Okay. See, I'll be 30. Wait, when's your birthday?
November 20th.
Oh, mine's the 10th.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, so I'll be 38 on the 10th.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, so like that, the second band I was in, I was the oldest guy in the band.
Yeah.
And the other guys are probably like, so I was like 21 in that band, and the other guys were like, they were in high school, so they're like 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had like live journals. They were like the generation of live journals. And I feel like maybe I'm like right at the age that's like a little too old for that.
You just missed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't really get into that shit.
Yeah. Like I remember, I don't even know if I had a personal MySpace. Like I can remember going on MySpace and, you know, like checking out bands and whatever. And I'm sure I had like some kind of MySpace, because I don't know, I can't remember if you needed it to anyway, but like I don't think I ever posted anything on it or anything. But so in the book, each chapter, as I mentioned earlier, is I don't know if it, like, would you describe it and say that each chapter is based around a song? Like, I guess what I'm asking is like, how did that kind of idea come forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say that just because like I don't want people thinking that the chapters are essays about the song, because
yeah, totally.
They're almost not at all about the song. It's kind of different in each chapter. Like the first chapter is Jimmy Eat World's 23, because that was the song that was playing on my headphones as that scene is happening, and it explains that in the book, you know, that was playing in my ears while this is happening. And so I had written a couple things in the past, like just short like music journalism stuff, where like I did a review about Warped Tour one year, and within that I would drop lyrics from the band playing, because I wrote it kind of as like a narrative story about my experience there. And so I would drop those song lyrics in between paragraphs when I'm talking about like Reliant K or something. And so I had used that format before, and so it started like kind of coming natural, not natural, but I really liked doing that. Just kind of like interrupting the story with the song. And so that just happened with the 23 chapter. But then there's chapters like the Two Door Cinema Club chapter, which takes place at a Two Door Cinema Club concert. And then there's some like flashback stories of Two Door Cinema Club. So there's a Two Door Cinema Club song on that one. And then there's chapters like the one with the Bright Eyes song, Another Traveling Song, which the song is about a guy, you know, writing, you know, staying up all night writing, or trying to write, but not being successful at it. So, and I never referenced the song at all in that chapter. It's just, it just pops up. But the chapter is about me in a hotel room trying to write, you know? So the songs are used differently, but the format stays the same. And then there's like the chapter, the Smoking Popes Megan chapter, and there's the karaoke scene where like Lisa Loeb's Stay pops up because we sang it at karaoke, and then Hands Down by Dashboard Confessional pops up. So like those songs are literally in the scene. So it's weird. It's all over the place of why these songs appear in there.
I have to say, I love that and maybe this says something about your writing or your view on writing, but that you're describing chapters as scenes. Now, obviously, that's something that plays out, especially when, if a book, say, gets adapted to a film type thing. But like to look at them, because now when I hear you saying these things, it makes me actually want to go back and read the book again and try to, like, I guess, put myself, for lack of better words, in your shoes, and like as if it's playing out like a movie. Now, you obviously reference, I want to say you reference High Fidelity in the book, specifically the film version. I want to say, you also reference Say Anything in the book. So there's movies that definitely come up, and I have to say, I've actually never seen Say Anything.
Oh my God.
It is a movie that I used. What was that for? Because as you probably noticed, I use clips from movies at the beginning and end of every episode. And so depending on the episode, if it's an interview, I typically try to ask them what their favorite movies are. So I could use that. If it's just a regular episode, typically, and this is, I guess, kind of a little behind the scenes, but typically it's if a movie comes up when we're talking about it, like when we're recording, whatever, I try to reference things that way, just tie things together. But so I did actually use a clip from Say Anything recently for an episode, and I can't remember
which clip did you use.
It was the one where he's on the phone asking her to go to the party. And it was like, because basically all I do is I just hit up YouTube and I type, unless I know specific, like if I know the movie well enough and I'm like, oh, this scene would be great, like if anyone was ever like, oh, a Kevin Smith movie, I'd be like, all right, I know what scene I'm using, sort of thing, right? But like so this one, having never seen it, even though I'm like, over the years, I'm like, I need to see that movie, because obviously, the boombox thing's been referenced in countless music videos and what have you, and it just seems like a movie that I'd enjoy.
I think you definitely would love it. And sorry for the spoilers in the book then.
I don't even, well, the best part is, so Aaron is my regular like co-host on the show or whatever, and he gives me a hard time all the time because he'll tell me things, whether it's a text message or whatever, and I just completely forget about them. So if there's a spoiler in the book, I honestly don't remember it. So I'm like, well, good. I mean, maybe if I, when I finally get around to watching the movie, something will come and it'll like jog my memory, like, oh, friggin' Mike spoiling it in his book again. But yeah, no. So I guess what I also wanted to ask, because I know you've been kind of announcing some news about an audiobook that's coming out. I was giving you a hard time about audiobooks earlier, but why don't you tell us? So I guess maybe give a brief synopsis of the news, like who's doing it and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of fun. That we can talk a little more.
So an actor named Tyler Posey recorded the audiobook. He was the star of the Teen Wolf series on MTV, which is really freaking good. I know, like, anybody I've mentioned this to has made fun of me, but I'm like binging it right now because it's so good.
That's awesome.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with like Tyler reading the audiobook and like the couple times I got to meet him and hang out with him. Nothing to do with that. Like, I watched it I started watching it to like see, what it was like, and I couldn't stop. I must have watched like 6 or 7 episodes in a row because the cliffhangers at the end of each book. And now I'm on like season 4.
Right on.
So yeah, it's a good show. People should check it out. But he's done some movies too. I mean, that series was like, I think it ended probably like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
But so he's doing a lot of movies now and stuff. But and he's in a band called 5 North, which is on John Feldman's label.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a pop punk band. It's really good. They put out an EP in the last year that sound like, it reminded me of Homegrown.
Right on.
So kind of like early 2000s pop punk.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, he's really into this music too. He's like DJ'd emo night and stuff in LA. And he's always like, it's really crazy because like, I knew that I wanted to adapt this into a TV show. Eventually, I don't have a script written or anything, but and to go back to what you said earlier about like me referring to these as scenes.
Yeah.
Like, I've written more scripts than anything. Like I've written a bunch of scripts for like a sitcom that I wrote with a buddy of mine, and I wrote another like drama pilot. But I've always been like a script writer.
Right.
And I think it's like, mainly because this book is so weird, and this book only exists because of the way that I wrote it. You know, like I was in a hotel room, just as it says in the book. I popped a lot of pills and drank a lot
Yeah.
of booze and
Yeah.
was depressed and just started writing. I never thought in my life I would write a book, but I've always thought I would write screenplays, you know? And so I think that's why I call them scenes, but it's also because like I'm a very visual person and I
Right.
picture them in my head. Um, and so yeah, I've always wanted to turn this into a TV show. So when I thought about that, I kind of like Googled younger actors, younger Latino actors. I actually
Right.
Googled hot Latino actors.
How'd that Google search go for you?
It went great. And I didn't mean like hot sexy. I meant like hot, like who are the hottest actors right now, you know?
Right.
Because I don't know who's a cool young actor now. I'm
Yeah.
38 years old.
Yeah.
And like I'm half Mexican too. And so, and I mentioned that a couple times in the book. And so like I didn't want to like just book some normal or like hire some like normal white actor to be this guy.
Yeah.
And when Tyler came up on that Google search, I was surprised because he doesn't look Mexican, but I don't look Mexican either. And
Right.
so that just made it even more perfect. And I used to run the social media accounts for the TV show Workaholics.
Okay.
When I worked, because I worked at Comedy Central for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And Tyler was on an episode of Workaholics
Yeah.
when I worked on that. And I like made this like Easter egg website based on a line that he says in the show. And so I just thought that would be funny if like we actually ended up working together after I did that.
Yeah.
And I knew that my friend Dana, who's a publicist, she's a music publicist, and her company is the PR company for my book. But I've known her for over a decade, and she's the publicist for like The Used and Bayside and Hopeless Records. I want to say like Equal Vision Records too. She reps Newfound Glory. Like,
Yeah.
she was Warped Tour's publicist for the last like 4 or 5 years of Warped Tour. So she's just like runs shit in this world, you know. And her company's called Big Picture Media. Well, she represented Tyler's band.
Okay.
And so I knew that like she could probably put us in touch, and she did. I asked her if she could, you know, text Tyler and see if I could get in touch, and he gave her his address so I could send him a book. And I also knew that he's pretty open about mental health issues that he's had, the depression that he's dealt with and stuff. And currently, like, he's been sober for a short while and has been pretty open about his, you know, drug issues or alcohol issues that he's had. So like everything, the more I like looked into him, was just perfect, you know, like it all just came together. And he read the book and called me and, you know, told me he loved it. And, you know, we talked about it a lot. And so he was on board, and he's on board too if it becomes a TV show. Like
That's awesome.
I mean, he told me he'd be down to do it. So that's one cool thing going on there with that. The other cool thing that's been a huge pain in my ass is that I'm including all the music on the audiobook.
I was kind of wondering, I think I'd seen maybe you posted about it on Instagram or there's something anyway, and you referenced there was some wording that you used. I was like, is the music in the book? Like, are you going to use that in the audiobook?
Yeah. So like we were talking about how in every chapter, like, lyrics from the songs pop up. And the way I always described it to people was that it's, you know, because like I said, I don't want people to think it's an essay. So I would say like, it's not like an essay about the songs, but the songs are used as like a soundtrack to the chapters. So if you were watching it on a TV show, wherever the songs pop up in the book would be like the part in a TV show where the soundtrack swells and the song plays. And so that's what's going to happen in the audiobook. Like, it's already finished and mixed.
Right on.
And so every chapter has the song in there playing where it appears in the book. Even the karaoke scene, like, I got permission from Lisa Loeb's people to use Lisa Loeb's Stay.
It's not like you singing.
No, it's not. And which you still need permission to do if you
totally
wanted to do that. But and Chris Carrabba like gave me or let me use Hands Down from the the So Impossible EP,
Right.
because he owns that version, and like
Yeah.
Universal Music owns the Mark Mission
Yeah.
Brand Esquire version, which is harder. Like Universal's kind of the only company that's been giving me trouble for
Yeah.
songs. So he let me use the version that he owns.
Yeah.
And he's been super cool. Like we had a Zoom like chat, and then I went to Nashville and got to meet with him in person. And Josh and the Smoking Popes let me use a version of Megan that they recorded, because that's also with Universal Music Group.
Yeah.
And so they just like let me use that song. But then like Hopeless Records was really cool about letting me use the Dangerous Summer stuff. Well, AJ from the Dangerous Summer got the whole ball rolling by emailing Hopeless Records for me and asking them if I could use the songs. So they hooked me up there. But yeah, man, it's been exhausting. There's like 23 songs in the book, and
That's fitting.
I have to, yeah. So I have to like reach out to every label, every publisher. Yeah, man, it's been hard. The only song I don't have cleared right now is the Two Door Cinema Club song.
Okay.
But that's, kind of, it's in the works. So they'll all be done by when the book gets. The book won't come out until they're all done. So
yeah, for sure. I'm excited to hear it because it just. I could probably count on one hand how many audiobooks I've listened to.
Yeah.
So I'm not well versed in, what usually goes into an audiobook, but this just sounds like, having enjoyed the book, because when I read the book, I would, before each chapter, I would just sit and listen to the song, which obviously you provided. There's QR codes in the book for Spotify and Apple Music playlists. So you don't even have to look it up. But yeah, so I would sit there and I'd listen to the song and then kind of read, and then I just let the playlist play or whatever as I read, because I don't know about you, but I like to have music playing when I read, because any other noise, it's weird, any other noise will distract me. Like if someone's talking, I'm just going to be listening to what they're saying regardless of what it is. If it's music, I can let it do its thing and tune it out.
Man, I can't listen to music. Like that's like the biggest irony of my life is I can't listen to music and do anything I need to focus on.
Right.
Like I can like cook and listen to music, clean the house. But if I'm like, working on something, I can't like sleep with music on, because I always listen to lyrics. Like I can't not focus on lyrics. So like that's where Explosions in the Sky comes in for me.
Sure,
I listen to them so much. Like I can put them on and actually like work on stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense. And I will say, like, if it's music that maybe I'm not overly familiar with, and there are lyrics that kind of jump out to me, that'll distract me, and all of a sudden it'll be like, I've been like reading the words in the book but not paying attention. I got to go back. But if it's something that I know and have known forever, then it's just kind of, it can be there. But it's just it's weird. Like I can, if it's quiet, I can read for sure. But I almost use the music to drown out any other outside noise that might be going on. But so when you would write, like you said, did the music journalism sort of thing, if you're writing a review for an album, would you listen to it as you're writing it, or would you have to like listen to it, kind of jot notes, and then just not touch it while you wrote?
I would listen to it before I write, and kind of like, that's the thing, man, is like I'm also not like a draft revision person. I kind of like work things out in my head before I ever write them down.
Gotcha.
And so that's how I would do it too. Like when I reviewed concerts and stuff, I would I'd take little notes on my phone. Or like if I was reviewing South by Southwest or a music festival, like South by Southwest, like I would check in at every bar that I went to. I would like take photos, because I would always get drunk, and that's how I would like go back to like what I needed to review, and like the timeline of the festival. I would go reference that stuff. But like reviewing a record, no, I would just like sit down and like enjoy the record on its own, and then while I'm writing, I'll like go back and reference the song to like see. I'll remember like oh yeah, so in track 3 there was these lyrics I really wanted to write about. Let me go back and like look at those, like hear those lyrics again.
Yeah, no, and I think that's more what I mean, not necessarily like writing your review as you're listening to,
Yeah.
the record, but yeah, like to, because whenever I review anything, I've always got it. And a lot of times it is on for those specific reasons. I'll be like, oh, what was that part in this song? And you go check it out. And from there,
Yeah.
it's just playing until I'm like, oh, what was this part in this song or whatever, right? Then you're
Yeah.
jumping around.
Cause
But
yeah, and cause also like I'll want to like compare it to something, or like a riff will remind me of a riff here, and then I'll have to
yeah,
go like find that song to like
yeah,
really, really like pin it down, you know?
yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Like when we're getting ready for an episode on Strike Anywhere, and there's one of the, I can't remember the song specifically off the top of my head right now, but the melody in the chorus, I'm like, I wish I could remember the words that I'm hearing in my head, because it's from like I'm hearing a different song, and it just drives me crazy because I
Yeah.
don't even have like the slightest idea what the words are. So I couldn't, it's not like I can like Google it and try and like narrow it down. I'm like, no, there's just a melody here that I
Yeah, dude,
know
I'll
from
do
something.
that, and I'll go on like Spotify and I'll click every song,
Yeah.
and I'll know within like 3 seconds of the song if that's
Yeah.
it. I'll know the melody, and it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so we were going to talk about, I said we were going to talk about the Dangerous Summer, and
Yeah.
then I listened to the record a couple times, and then I never took any notes on it. But I will, one thing I will say about the Dangerous Summer that I love, and then maybe we can just kind of jump from there. But um, is there a band that every time I listen to them, I feel like, because they come up a couple times in your book too, but I feel
Yeah.
like they're a band that I've known my whole life, even though I don't listen to them regularly. They have this weird nostalgic sound to them without actually being something from like my nostalgia.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's what I think that is. And this is like 100% what it is for me, even though I've listened to, their record Reach for the Sun probably more than any other record.
Mhm.
Um, but even before that, I know what you're talking about. And I think it's because the singer AJ
Yeah.
is so like genuine in his like delivery of his lyrics, it's like it's the first time he's thinking of those words, and
Right.
like you can feel the pain in his voice, or you can feel the sadness if that's what it is on those lyrics. Like he's so good at like expressing the feelings that go with those songs, that I think it makes you feel that way, that you're like, you know talking to a friend or something, or
Yeah.
like hearing somebody tell you personally this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting with them because his like, you brought up his voice. He's got a unique voice for sure. Like
yeah,
I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head that he sounds like. But he also doesn't, I think one thing I really enjoy is that he never really seems to like over sing. And
yeah,
maybe part of that plays to what you're saying in, like it's like he's singing it for the first time. Cause I mean, I'm sure when you've written songs, or when I've written songs, when I'm first like singing them and just like kind of like fleshing them out a little bit, I'm not usually going all out either. Right. So it's just
yeah,
like, it's just something that flows and it feels natural.
yeah. And it's almost like he's not even like singing a song. It's
Yeah.
like he's really is just telling you how he feels,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, man, that's what's connected me to that band for so long. And I mean, I know him now, and I've met him and spent a lot of time talking to him, but just in the last like year and a half, and I mean, I've been listening to him for 10 years,
Yeah.
and that's what's connected me to that band for so long. And it's every album, man. Even his new records,
Yeah.
he's still the same. Like
Yeah.
it's like he's just talking to you about how he feels, and it's not like he's performing a song.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like putting on a Dangerous Summer album, even if you've never heard it before, but you've heard them, I think you know what you're going to get. And I don't know. Yeah. It's this band that every time I listen to them, I'm always like, why don't I listen to these guys more? Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? There's a couple bands that kind of like fall in that category for me, especially bands that are, kind of have been making their name, let's say in the past 10 years sort of thing. Cause like Tiny Moving Parts is another band that every
yeah,
time I
yeah,
put them on, I'm like, why? Like I've gotten to the point with them where I'm like, okay, they're just always on my phone. And they're kind of like one of those fallbacks, or if I don't know what to listen to, I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I'll listen to Tiny Moving Parts. And a lot of that's because I think the guitar work on those records is
for
just
sure. Have you ever seen them
fantastic.
live?
I did get to see, yeah, I did. Here's the thing: living in Canada, and we don't like, in living in Western Canada, we don't get a ton of great shows. Like we get,
Yeah,
I shouldn't say that. We do get great shows. They're just not all the time. So I did get to see Tiny Moving Parts. They opened for the Wonder Years, which was probably
yeah,
like just one of my absolute favorite shows, maybe of all time.
yeah. I
Um,
caught that tour.
yeah. And it was because, yeah, Wonder Years were playing Sister Cities, which I know a lot of people, that record kind of split fans because, they got further away from that earlier pop punk sound. But I love Sister Cities. Same reason I love a lot of records, that kind of fall, in the post hardcore emo sort of world, and just the sense that it's like there's a lot more kind of like dynamic variance going on. And
Yeah.
the guitars are just beautiful on that record.
Yeah,
Uh,
I didn't really follow the Wonder Years after um Suburbia.
mhm.
Um but I listened to The Greatest Generation, and I mean I listened to that a little bit, but I mean I didn't like listen to it as much as I listened to Suburbia. But
Mhm.
here's the thing, is like every time I come across their later stuff, I ask myself why I stopped listening to them,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I love it. I love his lyrics. I love the way he, sings too. Um, yeah, I mean, and yeah, I mean, I could tell the difference in Sister Cities, so it
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
it didn't make me like want to, dive into it as much. But then like it'll come up on my shuffle and I'll be like, why did I not
Oh,
like get
yeah.
into this record? It's so good.
Yeah, it's funny because when that record first came out, there was like some production things on it that I was like, oh, I don't know if I like the way it sounds overall, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a sound that kind of like grows on you. And then the songs were just, I again, like when I play guitar, typically I like my guitar soaked in reverb and delay. So the fact that they were doing that more, but mixing that with, I mean, the Wonder Years, right? Like it was
Yeah.
just like, and I also felt like Dan was singing, he again was showing a lot more kind of dynamic variance in his singing, quieter parts. He's always done some quieter parts, but most of the time, especially on those older records, he's just kind of like belting it out, right? Like
Yeah.
he's doing the Dan Campbell thing, which is great too. But I just loved, yeah, how he's all over the place on the newer stuff. So that tour with Tiny Moving Parts, though, it's like it's still one of those shows where I look back on and I go, man, like missing concerts right now. It's concerts like that, right? Where I'm just
Oh,
like,
for sure. Yeah, I love Tiny Moving Parts live, and I haven't seen them. In fact, I don't know if I did catch that tour with Wonder Years and Tiny Moving Parts. Um, but I saw them at Riot Fest years ago, and I've seen them probably like two or three times live, and they just seem like so happy when they play. Like the I don't know
yes,
the dude's name, but like the
Dylan, yeah,
singer,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, he's like always has a smile on his
I
face
know, it's
every second of the show. It's great.
incredible. Especially for writing such sad music.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting because I listened to an interview with him. I want to say it was, I mean, this was a couple of years ago now, but I think it was on the Washed Up Emo podcast.
Mm.
And I just remember him saying, because on that, Tom was talking about how, like they've got this sound that really obviously like calls back to like that 90s, late 90s kind of Midwest emo thing, and
Yeah.
asking, like if, he apparently didn't grow up on any of that, didn't really have any idea what it was. And it was just
Wow.
kind of what they were playing. Right. Like I feel like he said he referenced some other band that would like not fall within that scene at all as to why he plays guitar the way he plays guitar.
Huh.
But then, yeah, when you put it all together, it's just like, it's this really, they're for sure one of my favorite kind of like bands going today. And
Yeah.
maybe one day I'll get to see him again. Who knows? Like even when
Yeah,
tours start,
man.
I don't know if they'll come up here, but
Yeah, and I'm like, even when tours start, I don't know when I'll feel comfortable
right.
going
Did you
to a
miss out
show.
on, like, so did you have tickets to specific shows that got canceled? Like I feel like everyone probably has
No,
something. No?
I actually don't think I did. But that's for yeah. I don't know. Oh, you know what? I did have tickets to see Bright Eyes because
Okay.
they were like they hadn't toured in a really long time.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
gonna start playing. I had
Do you think?
tickets to Bright Eyes. There was another tour. I definitely like not My Chemical Romance. I'm not
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
um I think I like aged out of emo when My Chemical Romance was blowing up.
I had Three Cheers.
Yeah.
And because I mean that was like I was big into, because I want to say it came out, when would that have come out? Shortly? No, maybe not shortly. Maybe it was a couple of years or whatever, but around the time that like the Used self-titled was out, like I was listening to that, and then the Used released Maybe Memories, which was like a B-sides thing with a DVD documentary stuff that was great. And so
Yeah.
My Chemical Romance came out sometime in there, and so I had Three Cheers, and I was always like, it's a little. There's some songs I really like, and then there's some songs that are a little weird, and then I didn't follow them after that.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to think. I had tickets to something else that like I had to get them as soon as they went on sale because
yeah,
I knew they were going to sell out.
was it
But
Rage?
no, I've never been a Rage fan.
Okay, because that was the one. Like that was probably the biggest one. It's still technically on that show.
Yeah.
Because I got tickets. They were coming up here and bought tickets. It's the most I've ever spent on tickets to a show, easy. And it was like,
Yeah.
it was supposed to happen, and then obviously COVID happened, and so they rescheduled. Right now, it's rescheduled for June. So I mean, there's still like this very slim outside chance. But I'm like, the problem is, even if, you know, say our numbers in Canada were at a place where shows could start happening again, bands still need to be able to tour to make those shows happen, right?
Yeah.
So it's just this thing where it's like I'm like, it's not. I'm just waiting for my money back. But there was that, and then I had tickets to see Jimmy Eat World, which got postponed and then canceled. I had the Dashboard Confessional, like the DC-20 acoustic tour or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
the last night concerts happened in
yeah,
New York. He played that tour here in New York, but I went to see Dave Haas.
Okay,
because he was playing the same night, and I went out on the road for like 5 weeks with Dave, and I love Dave. He's such a great songwriter.
Yeah.
So I went to see him play the night before concerts were canceled in New York. So yeah, I missed the Dashboard thing, but I just saw. I mean, I've seen him a million times, and I just saw him recently too.
It's funny with Dashboard because I can't even recall when he came up here. I think I feel like I remember this very weird thing where he opened for U2 up here at this like a huge that I didn't go to. I was like I have zero interest in going to see U2, and then it turns out Dashboard open, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And that's the only time I can remember hearing him come up here. And so when he was doing the Twin Forks stuff, they came up here a couple times, and so I went and saw them both times. Mainly, I won't lie, the first time was because I'm like, well, maybe he'll play a Dashboard song or two, and then I can kind of like check it off the list in like this roundabout way, right?
And did he?
He did. He always played at both shows I saw him at. He played one Dashboard song. It was a different one each show. I can't even. It wasn't any of like his monster ones, right? So, and then though, it was announced that he was coming, and so I got to see him on the. Was it Crooked Shadows or whatever, his last album he released, on the tour for that. So I was like, oh, sweet. And then I saw him 2 more times within like the same year because he came up. It was like all of a sudden he was up here all the time. I'm like, what's going on? Like, it's been years. And I mean, he was also fairly inactive with that band for a while too, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, obviously he wasn't going to be coming up here to play, you know, one-off shows at a small club sort of thing, right? So, but.
I think that DC-20 tour got canceled after the New York show.
Oh yeah.
Because I heard Matt Pryor talk about it. I think that was their last show on that tour. Because the next day is when everybody started canceling tours. But yeah, I love Riot Fest. I go to Riot Fest. I try to go to Riot Fest every year.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I definitely would have gone to that, if concerts were still happening.
Yeah.
But no, I can't think of any other. I mean, I watch Bayside every chance I get, so I probably would have gone to the Bayside Senses Fail tour, but I didn't have tickets for it.
Yeah, the only other one that I missed that I had tickets for was Face to Face. I think it's 25th anniversary of Big Choice, which I was looking forward to seeing that because the last time they were up here, it was like the turnout was not good, and so I was surprised that they were coming up again. And I'm pretty sure when I checked at some point, like tickets were sold out. So I was like, oh, I would love it. Cause I mean, they're one of my all-time favorite bands. So I'm like, to see them play in a full room again would be, cause it was this weird thing where I saw Face to Face, and it was like this room where you could literally like social distance in this room with how many people were there. And
Yeah.
then, you know, a week or two later, Millencolin was up here and they were playing
Oh,
another room
man.
and it was just like packed out. Right. And I was like,
Dude,
why was this not for Face to Face? Like,
I think Millencolin is the last band that I like love and grew up on that I haven't seen.
oh man. Yeah. I hadn't until that, and it was
Because just through like music journalism and stuff, I've been able to kind of, and going to festivals, I've
sure.
been able
Yeah.
to see just about every single band that I've always loved,
Yeah.
except them.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'd love to see those guys.
They were, I mean, Millencolin's a band too that, I mean, say I said this about the Dangerous Summer, where you put a record on, especially since like Penny Bridge Pioneers, you put a record on and you know what you're going to get, and you know it's going to be more Millencolin and it's going to be good. Face to Face is the same way too, for the most part. Like, I don't know if you've listened to Protection that they released a couple of years ago, but it's one of my favorite Face to Face records, and you know it's that late in their career, like it's incredible.
No, I just saw them. I mean, it might have been right at that record. And they toured through here with Lagwagon.
Oh yeah,
that was great. Like I've see, that's another thing too. Like Lagwagon was one of the first punk bands on the like mixtape that went around my theater group. And so I was into Lagwagon very early, but didn't see them until like 2010 or something, because you know where I'm from in Texas, and also like I grew up poor, so there wasn't a lot of traveling for concerts. But yeah, like in my adult life, I've seen Lagwagon like at least 5 times.
Yeah, they're one of those bands who I've had the chance, and the last time they were here, I just decided not to for whatever reason. I was kind of late to the game with Lagwagon. Like we plan on doing a series on them in the future.
Oh yeah.
But like I was late to the game in actually becoming a fan of Lagwagon. I always knew who they were and what they sounded like, and was always like, oh yeah, Lagwagon, but never owned anything by them, never got into them, because I'm sure I would have had countless opportunities to see them over the years. Like I feel like they were one of those bands that was, you know, always around. But it wasn't until even just like the last few years that I've been like, oh yeah, like let's talk about feelings. Sure, I can listen to that. Like, you know, like and actually put things on.
And that's the cool thing too, man, is that like that stuff all still holds up.
For sure.
If you're a fan of it, it does. And I think that's like something really cool about right now is that you can get anything anytime. And so like nothing's old, you know?
Yeah.
So like just because like that's not old to you. So that's great. Like and that's how I feel like about my book too, is that like, you know, I think you might have brought it up since we kind of went back and forth on when we could actually do this, but I mean, I've had that conversation with several people, and even like Tom from Washed Up Emo, he's like so far behind on like interviews. I was like, it doesn't matter to me, man. Like I can talk to you in December, and then maybe that sells a couple books in December,
right?
Whatever. Like it doesn't have to. I'm not on like a record label or a publishing company that only cares about my book for 3 months. Like I self-published it, so like it's the new book to whoever hears about it whenever they hear about it, you know?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So is it, because I just heard about this recently when I interviewed Eric Grubbs, who wrote Post. Is it, so does like Amazon or whoever, do they print it on demand when you order it from them basically?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Like that's a thing.
Yeah. And there's another company that I work with called Ingram Spark, which is like one of the biggest book distributors in the world. So like they distribute books for major publishers. And so they'll get my book to, like, if you order a paperback from barnesandnoble.com, they'll print it on demand for Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
And that's the only other place I think that actually sells paperbacks and stuff, at least here in America. I don't really know what other book chains are actually out there competing anymore. So like, paperbacks, like you can get on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, but then it's like on ebook everywhere else. So.
Yeah. I did want to ask, because you mentioned kind of discovering old stuff that's then new to you now because you're just discovering it now. Do you have any bands, like not necessarily recently, but that I guess semi-recently, that you were like, oh, either you never checked them out or you never heard about them, that you checked out and you're like, dang, that was good. How did I miss out on this?
Man, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
That's fair.
Um,
It was, I mean, it doesn't happen every
I
day.
mean, you know what though, like, so like the Casket Lottery is putting out new music,
Yeah.
and that's made me go back
Yeah.
because I never really got into that back then.
Yeah.
And so like now I know that I like that music now. So
Yeah.
now I'm like going back to older stuff. So that's one for sure. Um, but yeah, no man, I can't think of anything off the top of my head
That's
other than that.
Love that you brought up the casket lottery though, because it was just the other day. So I mentioned earlier about thrifting for CDs and stuff like that, right? Like the only time I listen to CDs is in my car because at home I don't even know if I
Yeah.
know if I have a CD player in the house. I guess maybe my Xbox One would work as a CD player. That's about the only thing. But in my car, every now and then I've got CDs in there. And so just recently, the Casket Lottery Survival is for Cowards was playing. And I think I just swapped it out yesterday for uh, Jimmy Eat World Static Prevails. So I was
Oh,
like,
nice.
keeping it nice and new, up to date.
Yeah.
But
I can't
yeah.
remember if we have a CD player in our car. I don't think we
Yeah.
do.
Well, it's funny because I don't have any vehicles that are new enough to have Bluetooth. So I'm like, I always,
Yeah,
and
ours
so,
car doesn't have Bluetooth.
yeah. And so on like the last couple generations of iPhones, you need like the adapter or whatever, right?
Yeah.
To plug into your aux cable. So I have one in our one vehicle, but not in the other. And so I'm just like in my car that I drive
Yeah.
around, it's just
Our
CDs.
car has the USB in it, so I can
Oh yeah.
use a iPhone charger
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
play the music.
That's fair. I thought for a second you were gonna say put like a thumb drive. I'm like, man, that feels like that goes back farther than like aux
Actually, I don't know if
cables.
that. I wonder if that'd be possible because then
I
you
know,
have like all kinds of music.
oh yeah, I know for sure. Like some vehicles could do it. You could like
Yeah.
put a thumb drive in and then it would like load up on like your touch screen or whatever, and you can go
Yeah.
through
Now we
and
have a 2012 Honda Accord,
well,
so
it's
it's not that fancy.
newer than my
Uh,
vehicles.
um, but yeah, now you got me wondering where my CDs are because I used to have a
Yeah.
like big 4 CD
Yeah.
page,
Yeah.
giant album of CDs, and I don't know where that is
Which
now.
is funny because I have one of those now, not for like regular use, but because like there was at one point in time when we moved, I was like, well, I don't want to keep lugging all of these CDs around. Like this would have been at the time that like streaming services were just kind of starting. And I was like,
Yeah,
I don't need to keep moving all these CDs in cases in boxes that are just going to sit downstairs, but I don't want to get rid of the CDs. So
yeah.
I did the blasphemous thing where I went and got rid of all the cases and just put the CDs in like a binder sort of thing.
I don't know
So,
why that's blasphemous. I
well,
never thought that.
because I mean, so behind me, I've got all these like CD, covers, but
Yeah,
those are all things I've thrifted kind of within the past couple months
nice.
of just records. I'm like, yeah, these are good, but I always so I collect vinyl, and one of the reasons I collect vinyl is because I like, especially if it has an
Sure.
insert, right? Like being
Yeah,
able
yeah.
to see that sort of stuff. So speaking of like Sister Cities by the Wonder Years, that I didn't even get the special like deluxe edition, and it's one of the nicest pressings I have because they put so
Cool.
much time into it. But so like CD booklets, I'm always like, oh, I wish I still had that, but I just have this book of CDs. But yeah, it's funny because so it's up in a closet. Half of it is CDs and half of it's DVDs because I did the same thing with DVDs. I'm like, well, I don't want to get rid of these, even though every one of these things is on some streaming service that I already
Yeah.
pay for, right? But
Did you get the new Juliana Theory, Emotion is Dead,
no,
20th
so
anniversary?
yeah, so I don't know if you like in like the top 5 that I listed or whatever of the Tooth and Nail post hardcore records. I mentioned that Emotion is Dead is probably like the one that most people would pick in that spot, at least for a Juliana Theory record. And I
Yeah.
could just never get into it. I was listening to it.
Really?
Yeah, I was listening to it in like kind of preparing to write that list, and at some point in time I was like, I can't. I just turned it off. But then
Wow, that's so surprising.
yeah, well, it was just there was something vocally that was going on that I was like, I can't get into it. And
Yeah, there's a lot of falsetto in there, I think, that
yeah,
could bother some people.
yeah. And so then when I went back to whatever, I can't remember the name of the album before that, but the one I ended up picking,
Understand This Is a Dream.
that's what it is. I was like, I know it's like a sentence. But yeah, like that one I was like, okay, like vocally they were never super strong for me. This is
Yeah,
Juliana Theory, but
I can see
on
that.
that record I'm like it felt just more like genuine.
Yeah, yeah, because it was more like a gritty
Yeah.
punk kind of
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, dude, I listen to Emotion is Dead all the time still, and I feel like it holds up so much. But maybe you had to like it in the first place. I don't know.
I tried to like it. Like I saw them, they were on a tour, they were headlining, and Snapcase and Hope's Fall open. So I was at the show for Hope's Fall. I was like, that was at the time, that was my band. I was like, oh, I can't believe they're here. I ended up seeing them a couple times over years, especially when they play Warped Tour. But yeah, I remember going to that show, and I wasn't overly familiar with Snapcase, but I knew who the Juliana Theory was. So I watched Hope's Fall, loved it, watched Snapcase, and then Juliana Theory came on, and it was like one of these things where it was like, I just kind of left partway through. I think part of it was like, again, it was, I was familiar with them, and I knew that I wasn't a huge fan of them to begin with. And so I was like, well, I do kind of want to watch. And it wasn't as much on them as it was more just like, I was here to see Hope's Fall. And I was like, okay, I'm good to go. And it was like a 45-minute drive home. I was like, well, I could probably head home now.
Yeah.
You know?
They're definitely, that's one of my favorite records. And that new 20th anniversary, actually, I don't know if it's a repress or.
I guess that would insinuate that there was an original pressing, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if there was, but anyway, the packaging and everything is great. They did some cool stuff.
It looked really great. I was trying to remember if that one, so that one was done by Jason, the guy who from Unoriginal Vinyl, the guy who I interviewed. I was like, I'm pretty sure I saw him post about that. Cool. I'm looking at, I do remember looking at it and going like, man, that looks pretty sweet. Like I do know too, like he puts in talking to him, like he puts a ton of work and thought into.
Yeah. That seems like a very cool thing to do, man. Just like the different, like vinyl's so beautiful right now, man. I've been buying all the dashboard vinyl that he's been putting out lately. And man, some of those are so pretty.
I was like, I bought Places You Have Come to Fear the Most. And I was like, that's where I kind of had to stop. I always have to like especially because it was like shortly after that, he's like, oh, Swiss Army Romance. And because did they do the Unplugged? I think he did the Unplugged one too.
Yeah, I bought the Unplugged.
Yeah. And I was like, which I listened to that album so much when it came out. I love
it, dude. Like all the harmonies I sing on Dashboard songs, no matter what version, are from the Unplugged.
From that, and
then I'll air drum the drum parts from that Unplugged. I love that record so much.
It's so good. And like when it came out, I was working at a golf course, and at the time, like I didn't have, I mean, like, I don't even know if I don't think MP3 players were a thing. Maybe they were very early on. Like obviously burning CDs was a thing and whatever, but I didn't have like a Discman. I had a Walkman, like a cassette. Actually, it was probably a Panasonic Shockwave, if I remember correctly. It was yellow and gray. But anyway, every night before going to bed, I had like this 90-minute tape, and I would just dub whatever onto it and then just listen to that tape for 8 hours at work. Right.
Nice.
And so most of that summer though, it was the Unplugged album on one side, and then the other side was Wiretap Scars by Sparta. And I just listened to those on. So anytime I put those two things, any one of those albums on, I'm like immediately driving like a little tractor that rakes the sand pits at a golf course at 7 a.m. So
yeah, I remember when that Unplugged happened, they released a double, it was a CD with a DVD of it. And the girl that I was dating at the time got it for me for my birthday or Christmas or something. And I watched that thing all the time, man. I used to watch the DVD over and over.
Did you buy the copy of A Mark of Mission, A Brand of Scar that came with the DVD?
No.
Because so I don't know if it was because I don't think the CD had any extra songs on it. So I don't know that it was like a full-on deluxe version thing, but it came with a DVD, and the DVD was Dashboard Confessional doing a set of REM covers off of Automatic for the People. And then the last song, Michael Stipe comes out and sings.
I remember that happening.
Hands Down with him. It's just like, I watched another one I watched so many times, just being like, oh, this is so good. And like, it sold me on REM. Like I knew like the REM hits, but like from that point on, I was like, I need Automatic for the People.
Yeah. That's another band I like never got into.
I mean, they were too old for me, I guess you could say, in a sense, right? Like, they were affecting a generation before me, but outside of hearing those big radio singles, but so to hear Dashboard cover them, and in on that DVD, he talks about, I guess, discovering that album for the first time and whatever. And I'm like, okay, like that's so cool. And then so I had to get it. I eventually got it on CD. I still want to get it on vinyl. I've never purchased it on vinyl, but I'm sure I can get a repress on
Yeah,
Amazon
it's got to
right
be
now
out
if I
there.
wanted, right? Like it's got to be everywhere. So um but yeah, no. Man, music's so cool, hey?
Dude, I love this though. No, it's great, especially like right now, you know, where not where where none of us are hanging out with people and talking.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
um, no, I love just being able to like hang out and talk about music,
Yeah.
and shows and stuff. Like, yeah, it's great.
And books.
Books,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I did joke that we were going to talk about emo music and Nick Hornby all night. We hardly
Oh
talked
yeah,
about Nick Hornby,
yeah,
but High Fidelity is one of my favorite books of all time, and
yeah.
also
And
favorite
I,
movie.
like I said in the book, I've read the book. I've actually read the book
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
But
It's
I've
the
just seen the
only, yeah,
movie
it's,
a
I,
hundred times.
I think it's the only book outside of maybe Animal Farm, but Animal Farm hardly counts because it's like 80 pages. But I think it's the only book I've read more than once. I've started other
Oh
books
yeah.
multiple
And
times
see,
and
that's
never.
the thing too, man, is like I'll read a book. Like I've read Love in the Time of Cholera 3 times because I
Yeah.
love that book.
Yeah.
And so like I can read a book and I can read a book multiple times, but I just like my go-to thing of like what do I want to do right now is never read a book, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
um I don't know why. Like I enjoy it, and there
Yeah.
are books that I'll go back. It's like I'll read a book a third time before I go read a new book. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a smart move. I should
But
be reading more books.
it's funny because like I'll watch movies, or TV shows multiple times. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, you talked about Teen Wolf earlier and you kind of like, said, it's actually a good show, but you've had people kind of scoff at you or whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite, like when I absolutely get invested into a TV show a lot of the time, it's typically like a teen drama sort of thing,
Dude, you
right?
know
Like,
what? Like I started watching this is years ago, but I
yeah.
started watching Pretty Little Liars.
Okay. Yeah.
Um only because I had run out of TV shows to watch that I was actually interested in. But I know that those teen drama shows always have the best soundtracks.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's why I started watching that
Yeah.
show. But that show was I did not think was good, and so it
It didn't carry.
even with a good soundtrack, I couldn't watch
Yeah.
it. But yeah, man, those like I love the OC.
Yes.
I learned
Well,
about so many bands from the OC.
yeah.
And even Dawson's Creek back in the
Yeah.
day. Like, yeah, I love all that stuff.
I was going to say the only one TV show that I've watched for sure more than once all the way through is the OC. Although it's like work now because TV shows these days are like 13 episodes for a season or something,
Yeah.
right? You're like with the OC, that first season I think is 25 episodes.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like, and I don't think they, like another show that I watch that's a current show, it's been on forever, but The Walking Dead, but like
Yeah.
they'll do like a mid-season sort of
10
finale thing.
episodes,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah. But like the OC, they weren't doing that, right? Like it was
Yeah.
just like it was 25 episodes. Here you go. You're not going to get that huge cliffhanger like resolution or whatever,
Yeah.
like until episode 25. So it's funny because it's like it was a 4-season show, but within those 4 seasons, it's like 8 or 9 seasons
episodes,
worth of
yeah.
TV, right?
Yeah.
Like so.
Yeah, well, that's like network TV because like
Yeah.
network shows.
Oh,
are
yeah.
25 episodes a season or 23 episodes a season.
Yeah. But yeah, now
Um,
with like streaming services and like them doing their own like content, yeah, they
Yeah.
typically seem to be in that. I think I've even seen seasons that are like that aren't like what do they call them? Limited specials or whatever.
Oh yeah,
like,
limited series.
yeah, limited series that aren't those. I think the shortest I've seen is still like 8 episodes. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's crazy, which I love because I'm like, okay, cool, we're done that in like 2 nights. Let's move on to
Yeah.
something else now, right? Like,
Did you ever watch? See, like I also watched Gossip Girl because
Yeah.
I knew it was gonna have because it's from the same guy
Yeah.
who did the OC
Yeah.
and the same music supervisor.
yeah,
So I knew music, but Gossip Girl's great. I love that
yeah,
show.
yeah,
But also I started watching, or I was gonna ask you if you watched One Tree Hill.
yes,
I started watching that like 8 months ago for
Yeah.
the same reason,
Yeah.
looking for that good soundtrack. And I got into a couple episodes, but it wasn't the same.
No, and it's a show. So actually, I want to try and remember to go back to Gossip Girl in a second. But what a weird world we live in. It's a show that One Tree Hill that I watched it anticipating a show like the OC, which in a lot of ways it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you could really stop watching One Tree Hill after season 4, because what they do is they like, because with the OC, they went through high school, and then the season that really fell apart was when high school was over, right? Like they'd gone off to college, and then I mean, it probably fell apart for various reasons. But
Yeah.
with One Tree Hill, they actually, I don't know how far into
Oh,
it
they
you got.
time warp,
They
right?
yeah, they jump
Yeah.
ahead and they skip 4 years or whatever, and so it's like this really weird thing where all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm following these same characters who look the same because life didn't go 4
Life
years
didn't
in the
go that
future.
far. Yeah.
Yeah, and so but now they're like married with children, and it's like this weird sort of jump. But the
So
one thing
I
yeah,
only
go
made
ahead.
it to like season 2, like the beginning
Yeah.
of season 2, and it was just too dramatic, you know?
Yes. I mean, it also looks it. Like I feel like the way, and
Yeah.
maybe the OC they shot it that way too, but it's like everything feels like hazy and kind
No,
of
yeah, there's definitely like well, Gossip Girl was CW also, so I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. But I was gonna say, like with Gossip Girl and was it Josh Schwartz? Is that his
Yeah,
name?
Josh Schwartz.
Yeah. So because yeah, he did the OC and then he did Gossip Girl and he also did Chuck.
I was gonna ask if you watched Chuck. I love
Yeah.
Chuck.
And so Chuck was great because basically Chuck and Seth Cohen are Josh Schwartz, which is what I love
Yeah.
about it. Like he's based him off himself. But what I wanted to get to is have you seen the show Looking for Alaska?
No.
So it's a Josh Schwartz show,
Really?
but it's a John Green book. Have you ever read anything by John Green? So
I don't
he
think
did
so,
like,
no.
yeah, he did. I mean, he's like a young adult writer or whatever. He did like Fault Within Our Stars or whatever, and
Okay, yeah, so
Paper
I know them.
Towns.
I know the
Yeah.
movies, but yeah.
So Looking for Alaska, I remember I was browsing some like time wasting website at one point, and someone had like uploaded like a just like a quote from this book, and I can't even remember what the quote was now, but I like looked it up because I was like, that sounds awesome. What is that? And it was just like um a quote anyway about a guy describing, I think, like how this girl made him feel, sort of thing, right? Like there's a lot of like instances in your book where you kind of get into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so it was just this quote where I was like, what is that? So I looked it up, found out it's this book Looking for Alaska by John Green. So I read it. It's a pretty great book. I enjoyed it. And then I saw recently that I don't know who did it. Up here it was on like, so we have what's called the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And so they typically, like, do you know the show Schitt's Creek?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's like a CBC show, right? But
yeah.
they'll also obviously like pay for shows from elsewhere, and so this one was on there, and I was like, what? So at first I thought, is this is it a Canadian adaptation? And I see Josh Schwartz, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And it's actually,
Ah,
it's pretty good musically. Again, it hits on the nose.
cool.
I feel like I kept tweeting things about it, about how Josh Schwartz was just trying to make this like the OC part 2, because like one of the very first episodes where a big thing happens at Cotillion, and I'm just like, these things, I'm like, I've seen this before, right? But
Yeah,
so it's pretty good. But it's only one season, like a one and done type thing. Like that's the whole,
yeah.
unless they expanded on outside of the book, but the book is done in that one season. But
Huh.
it's pretty awesome. But yeah,
Yeah, I'll
teen
check it
drama,
out.
man. Yeah.
I've always loved like his stuff, so I'm sure I'll like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But anyway, man, I think that will.
But yeah, I was actually like when I went to Nashville like 2 months ago, I met up with Chris Caraba and he
Yeah.
signed that's like another thing. Like so I have like 10 copies of the book that
Yeah.
like Chris from Dashboard
Oh, that's
signed,
cool.
all the guys from Bayside signed, um, Matt Hoops from Reliant K signed it, AJ from The Dangerous Summer signed it, and Tyler Posey signed them in there. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna like raffle those off
That's
later,
cool. Yeah,
probably this month,
yeah.
to raise some money for charity. I got some posters that everybody signed to. So that's gonna be coming later. But when I met up with Anthony from Bayside, I was telling him about how I want to make this a TV show and I want to make it like the OC for people in their late 20s.
Yeah.
Because all of those drama shows are teen dramas.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, man, like our generation dealt with that shit long after that, and
Right.
there's no shows about that, it's like you're not, if you're dealing with that stuff, it has to be comical, like How I Met Your Mother,
Right. Yeah.
which was great in the like balance of like, I love shows like that and Scrubs, where it's like
Yeah.
a balance of drama. And
Did you see the show Happy Endings?
I don't think I watched all of it.
Yeah. I liked that
watched
show.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
but I think I felt like it was like too cheesy.
That's possible for sure. There's like I can picture like one character specifically that was very like over the top. But
I did like it though.
Did you see because I was like when you said like in their late 20s sort of thing, it was reminding me. Did you ever see the show Love on Netflix?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
See, I didn't I liked
You didn't
that
love
show.
Love?
I didn't love Love. Yeah, you know what? Have you seen You're the Worst?
No, I'm trying to think if my wife watches a ton of TV shows and I'll be like, hey, let's watch this. She's like, oh, I already saw it.
I feel like You're the Worst is kind of like Love, but better in that it like touches on the same topics.
Yeah.
The main guy in it's a writer. It deals a lot with like the like mental health side of like relationships.
Yeah.
And they're in their like early 30s. That's like the only example I know of that does a really good job of capturing that.
Right.
And so like I want to like turn this into a TV show that feels like the OC but for adults, you know?
Yeah.
Because I was 28 when I wrote this, you know, and like I'll admit I was super, you know, like my emotional intelligence level was not that of an adult.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I wind up the way that I do in the book.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty common for people in their mid to late 20s to mid 30s, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't get my shit together till my early 30s.
Right.
So, and I, you know, barely. But that's the thing is like, I think we also still don't feel so comfortable with allowing ourselves to struggle with that stuff because we feel like we're supposed to have our shit together,
right? Yeah.
More together by 24, you know?
Yeah.
And that's so not common. Like, we like, at least my generation, and I think probably people quite a bit younger than us, still feel like because we're told you go to high school, you go to college, you graduate by your 22, you get a job. So you should have your shit together by your 24, 25. Yeah. It's so uncommon that people have their shit together by 25.
For sure.
And we all feel guilty about it because we've been told that we're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so I want to make something that makes people feel more comfortable about
cool.
that.
That's cool. Well, I hope it becomes a thing, because if it's anything like the book, it'll be enjoyable.
Thanks, man.
So you did mention the raffle a minute ago. So are you going to be doing that on social media?
Yeah. I mean, I'll like have a website up for it, and then I'll push it all out in social media. So yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Mikey Lee Rock. It's MikeyLeeRock. And then my like production company, which I publish the book through, and I like put video content out, is Burger Media, but you can find it on social media under A Burger Joint, and that's BERGER.
Yeah.
So A Burger Joint. That's where you'll find most of the updates about the book and book related stuff. But yeah, man, I'm all over there, and I try to put stuff out pretty often, so people can find more like entertaining stuff connected to the book.
Well, this was fun. We literally talked. We were all over the map.
We were, man. That was fun.
You gotta kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you gotta take it up a notch. But you don't want to blow your wad, so then you gotta cool it off a notch. There are a lot of rules.